Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. Welcome to the Rotary Club of Toledo. Today we'll present another great meeting and program with Dean Horrigan. Before we get started, I just want to point out we do have sympathy cards right outside on the table in the lobby for Pat Mock and Dick Arnos, if you'd like to sign those before you leave today. I'd now like to ask past President Chuck Mann to come to the podium to deliver a reflection, and then have Lisa Wagner lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
We'll pray in a second. A few quotes about old age. This is from Sigourney Weaver. When you're young, there's so much that you can't take it all in. It's pouring over you like a waterfall. When you're older, it's less intense, and you're able to reach out and drink it. I love being older. That was pretty good. George Burns. Old age is when you resent the swimsuit issue of Sports Illustrated because there are fewer articles to read. And Mark Twain, age is an issue of mind over matter. It doesn't mind. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. Good stuff. Let's pray. Remember your people, O Lord, especially those to whom you have given the gift of long life. Reward them now for the good they have accomplished in the past. Forgive them for their failings. Make their last days happy, and give them your grace as they continue to grow through the challenges of their later years. Bring them and all your children to everlasting life with you. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, past President Chuck and Lisa. As we begin today's meeting, I'd like to thank and acknowledge this month's sponsor, Hartman and Associates. I'd like to ask greeter Maria White to please go to the floor mic to introduce today's visiting Rotarians.
President Dick, we have two visiting Rotarians today. Visiting Rotarians, please stand as I read your name and remain standing until President Dick welcomes you. Our first visitor is Jeff Anderson from Petoskey Sunrise. And our second visitor is Ken Robinson from the Perrysburg Rotary.
Welcome to you both. Thank you for being here today. Thank you. Now, if anyone has a guest they would like to introduce to us all, if you'd please go to the floor mic with your guest so we can hear you and see you clearly.
President Dick, I'd like to present Jim Park, Jr. He is with a park company. He is a partner in the insurance firm, and hopefully a new member.
Jim, great to have you here.
President Dick, backed by popular demand, is Manuel Carriaga, our Rotary Exchange student at St. Francis. And Gary Corrigan asked me whether or not we were going to pass him. We're going to pass him, we're also going to keep him.
Good to have you here, Manuel, as always. Thank you. I'd now like to ask Donna Bogan to go to the floor mic with an announcement from the Member Engagement Committee.
Hi, everyone. We all know that at Rotary we like to have fun, but we're also good at fundraising. So I want to remind everybody about March Matchness this Friday, March 22nd. It's going to be at the Toledo Club from noon until 8. The TVs will be provided so you can watch the games. There'll be free appetizers, cash bar. We'll have our own celebrity bartenders such as President Dick and Kathy Tate. We'll also have a visiting celebrity, Mark Makalinsky. We still have a few spots left for the bartending, so if you'd like to do that, please go into ToledoRotary.org and sign up. And as they say, come one, come all. Bring your friends, bring your family, bring your coworkers. It'll be fun. And in addition to that, we'll have $10,000 in tips will be matched for the foundation. So thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thanks, Donna. And I know a lot of you are going to be skipping out work early to go watch a game somewhere on Friday, so you might as well go to the Toledo Club and help the foundation. Now would be a great time to check into social media to let everyone know you're at the Rotary Club of Toledo. And then I ask that you please silence your phones for the rest of our meeting. Love to honor Rotarians in the news, and I'd like to recognize and have him stand up fellow Rotarian Jim Scheib, a member since 2005, who was just inducted into the Scott High School Hall of Fame. Jim, I know you're here. Congratulations. One of the things I also like to do is have our service committees, their chairs, tell us a little bit about what their committees are doing. So at this time, I'd like to ask Kendra Smith, the Youth Services Chair, to come to the podium for a brief presentation about that committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. That was weak. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, thank you. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing with the Youth Services Committee. So last year we were really excited. The Youth Services Committee was able to award over $55,000 in grants to 8 organizations in the community that are focused on serving youth in the Toledo area. We've got 23 members on the committee, which are doing a phenomenal job of just connecting us to non-traditional organizations that we haven't seen apply to Rotary before in the past, and just really important to think about. Rotary represents a large area of the Toledo region, and so how do we make sure that we're connecting with organizations from all of those areas? Last year, we completed the Read for Literacy supply drive, so thank you for everyone that participated in that. We've had a long-standing relationship with the Read for Literacy program in Claresday, and we were really excited to be able to do that again last year. But what we're really excited for is what's to come for 2019. So we're really going to continue to focus on new to us organizations. So how do we outreach to youth services based organizations to really inform them what Rotary is, that the grant opportunities are available, and really diversify the grants that we're providing through the Youth Service Committee. We're also really excited. We've put forth a proposal to the board for a new transformational project that's going to center around universal preschool. So as many of you know, the mayor, TPS, a lot of community partners are really rallying around the concept of universal preschool in Toledo. There is a study underway now, and where we're really positioning ourselves is not just to support that study, but really to be advocates as this continues to move forward and use our Rotary connections, both through the club and personal, to really make a commitment to seeing universal pre-K come to fruition in Toledo. And then we'll continue to do our grant-making activities, but also really excited to plan our service project for 2019. So if you're available, our next meeting is April 29th, where we'll be talking about that and taking some final suggestions so that we can make a recommendation. And then just really membership expansion. If you're not on a committee, if you're looking for a new committee, we would love to have you join us in Youth Services. Also just want to thank my Vice Chair, Candace Harrison, who has been a phenomenal assist to the committee as we try to move forward for 2019. So April 29th, 1 o'clock, come join us. We'd love to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kendra, for the great work your committee is doing. We appreciate it. This past Saturday, we had our second Rotary Kids Day, and these Kids Days are a cooperative effort with the area Rotary clubs that are in our President's Council. This one was at Toledo School for the Arts and was combined with the group Be Instrumental. We had a small but enthusiastic group, and I can't say enough about the kids at Toledo School for the Arts who provided some of the instruction and the entertainment. The Be Instrumental folks who bring instruments such as you see here that kids have not had exposure to. They get a chance to play those instruments, to learn more about what it's like to be a musician. So we're going to hopefully continue to work with the other Rotary clubs to use the strength of Rotary combined to get exposure for Rotary to children and to others in the community. But I want to thank everyone who was involved in that this past weekend. I would now like to introduce a new member to the club. Today I'm introducing a new member, David Tice. David works for Fifth Third Private Bank as a wealth management advisor and has been in the financial services industry since 1999. David is a certified public accountant. He has a bachelor degree in science from the University of Toledo and a master's degree in accounting from the University of Maryland, UC. David is currently on the board of the Toledo Humane Society and is a member of our club's Vocational Services Committee. And I especially want to single out David. When asked, he jumped right on being a member of the Vocational Services Committee, and I appreciate that very much. David is an avid outdoorsman. He enjoys spending time hunting, fishing, backpacking, and participating in triathlons. So for those of you eager to get a triathlon club here with Rotary, he's your man. David's proudest achievement is his happy marriage to his wife, Effie, of 28 years. David says she deserves all the credit and lots of sympathy. David and Effie enjoy traveling and spending time outdoors together. Please give David Tice a Rotary welcome. Thank you. David, great to have you. That's for you, and that's for you. Thanks. Great to have David as a member. I now would like to invite past President Eric Fankhauser to the podium to present a grant to Doreen Ellert of Wood Lane Industries.
Thank you, President Dick. On behalf of the Toledo Rotary Club Foundation, it's my pleasure today to present a grant check in the amount of $6,528 to Wood Lane Industries. This grant is providing funding for cartridge cleaning workstation 500 for the Laser Cartridge Express business. Our Vocational Service Committee members received the request, participated in the vetting process, and made the decision to recommend the grant approval to our club board and foundation trustees. It is due to the countless Toledo Rotarians who give unselfishly, which enables us to provide these grants. Thank you to everyone who continues to support our Toledo Rotary Club Foundation so we can continue to aid in supporting the needs of our community. I'd like to invite Doreen Ehlert, Executive Director of the Development for Wood Lane Industries, to come to the podium and accept the grant and share a short description of how our foundation's gift of $6,528 has helped their organization. Here you go. It's a big old check.
So he kind of took me off guard. First off, he told me that I could keep the check, and we had already kind of made room for it back in our production area. Laser Cartridge Express, or LC, is just one of the businesses that we have under Work Leads to Independence. We'd like to thank the Rotary Club for this generous gift. We were able to purchase a cartridge cleaning station, which, if you know anything about laser cartridges and remanufacturing laser cartridges, you basically take apart each individual part of the cartridge and clean it. The workstations that we had were approximately 26 years old, so it was nice to have this gift. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Annual Campaign Chairman Craig Roberts to come to the microphone to give an announcement about the annual campaign.
Thank you, President Dick. The grant that was just presented to Wood Lane Industries is a perfect introduction to my message today. The Toledo Rotary Club Foundation and our members have donated their time, talent, and treasure to our community and globally for more than 100 years. Last year, our club contributed over $200,000 to charitable organizations. If we wish to continue this mission of service above self, we must have the support of our members. Annually, our goal is to have 100% of our members contribute at whatever level is right for them. $1 is a contribution. Unfortunately, our current participation rate is only 37% of the members of this club. That is the bad news. The good news is it's March Matchness. As you know, a group of Rotarians have agreed to match all donations occurring at next Friday's event. up to $10,000. Now these generous folks have also agreed to extend that match to include any contributions made from today up until March 31st. That means your $50 contribution now becomes $100, $100 becomes $200, etc. And equally important for those who have not yet donated this year is that contribution will increase our participation rate. This is a win-win opportunity for all of us. Let's make the best of it. Right now in your inbox, there's a message linking you to the Rotary Foundation Donate page. You can simply access that link and immediately make a donation. If you're not comfortable with that manner of donating, Kathy and Katie will be available after the meeting to accept your check or credit card donation. And we also have envelopes available to take home if you want to use snail mail and mail in your gift. Many of us have already contributed and will be recognized in the Spoke later this week. If you have already contributed and donated, we thank you very much. If you have not contributed yet this year, please, now is the time to do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. And I can't stress enough what Craig just said. We do so many great things through the foundation. We all give to charity. Why not the Toledo Rotary Foundation and all the great work it does? At this time, I'd like to invite Rotarian Judy Siebenek to the podium to introduce today's speaker.
Thank you, President Dick. Dean Horrigan is an attorney concentrating on the legal needs of older Americans. Dean graduated from the University of Toledo with a BA in accounting in 1988 and obtained his law degree from the University of Toledo College of Law in 1992. He is admitted to practice law in the state of Ohio and the United States District Court for the Northern District in Ohio. Dean is the chairman of the Advocacy Committee for the Coalition of Organizations Protecting Elders. He is a member of the Toledo Bar Association, where he formerly served as chairman for the Toledo Bar Association's Probate Elder Law Committee. Dean is also a member of the Northwest Ohio Gerentological Association and Senior Collaborative. Dean's additional past memberships and affiliations in his efforts to serve the elderly community include the Board of Directors for the Advanced Care Planning Coalition of Greater Toledo, the Advisory Council for Lutheran Social Services Volunteer Guardianship Program, the Board of Directors for the Northwest Ohio Gerentological Association, and memberships with the Toledo Estate Planning Council and Parish Council for St. Patrick's of Heatherdowns Parish. Dean Horrigan is the recipient of the Community Service Award from the Area Office on Aging in recognition of his service and commitment to senior citizens in the field of elder law. Welcome, Dean.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you to the Rotary for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm looking forward to present on a topic that's very important to me, both personally and professionally, and that is the area of protecting elderly, protecting our senior citizens. I'll be speaking today on a number of topics. First, we'd like to go through and identify for the group the various types of elder abuse that are out there, provide for the group definitions and some statistical information that'll help us kind of weed through the presentation at the same pace. We're using the same terminology. I would like to intend on providing an update with respect to some recent pronouncements with new mandatory reporters of elder abuse, what it means to be a reporter of elder abuse, how you go about making those reports, and so forth. Finally, I'll be shifting over into the use of powers of attorney, both for favorable purposes in protecting our seniors, as well as the misuse of those powers of attorneys for purposes of exploitation. And concluding with how guardianships can sometimes serve as the best protection for our senior citizens. Before I get into the meat of the presentation, though, I did want to make mention of an organization that's very dear to me that I've been a member of for a number of years. It's known as the Coalition of Organizations Protecting Elders. For those of you who might not be familiar with the organization, it's known as COPE. It's a community organization here in Lucas County comprised of approximately 100 different entities and individuals whose sole purpose is to meet for the purpose of discussing and addressing issues of abuse, neglect, and exploitation of our elderly citizens. The co-chairs of the organization are Judge Jack Puffenberger of our Lucas County Probate Court and Cheryl Conley of Memory Care Lane Services. There are a number of other organizations in the group, everyone from, we've got the Lucas County Prosecutor's Office, Adult Protective Services, various nursing homes, Area Office on Aging, Toledo Police, Toledo Fire, and a number of other organizations who strive to protect our senior citizens. I provided a handout, and hopefully everyone has an opportunity to bring a handout home with them. On that handout, there is contact information for a number of organizations I'm going to make reference to. The first of which is this organization, COPE. COPE, as I mentioned, Cheryl Conley is the co-chair. She's been kind enough to provide her telephone number as a contact. Feel free to use my telephone number as well, should you need to reach out to the organization. To give you an idea of why someone might want to reach out to our organization, we conduct in our regular monthly meetings, we do something known as an I-team investigation. As a result of, in that investigation, we get together in a subcommittee of whoever's able to attend on that particular meeting date to discuss various case studies that might be presented to us from the community. Could be with someone within the organization, or it could be somebody from the outside. The issues range from maybe addressing housing needs of our elderly, malnutrition, perhaps abuse cases, and it allows for a collaborative effort to address these concerns, come up with some proposed solutions, return those solutions to whoever submitted the issue, and hopefully resolve some, in a very practical matter, resolve some issues facing our elderly community. So feel free to use us as a resource if your need should arise. Turning to the specific issue of elder abuse, you tend to think of elder abuse in one of three primary categories. You've got abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Abuse can be further subdivided into three categories: emotional abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. When we're referring to neglect, we're either talking about one's self-neglect or neglect by third parties. And finally, the area of exploitation. The Ohio agency that's in charge of receiving reports of elder abuse is the Adult Protective Services Division of Department of Job and Family Services. In 2017, APS had reported over 16,000 reports of elder abuse. And these are just the reported cases. Of those reported cases, they have kept track of how those kind of break down in terms of percentages. You've got most of them in the areas of neglect. 45% self-neglect, 23% neglect of others. Exploitation's pretty heavy in there, 18% in exploitation. Then you have emotional, physical, and sexual abuse down the line. So it's important to know, if we're going to report these instances of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, what does the statute define abuse? How do they define neglect? How do they define exploitation? Well, the pertinent code provision is Ohio Revised Code 5101.60. That's where the definitions are comprised for purposes of the Adult Protective Services looking into these different areas. And I'm not going to read to you the full, you can see it on the screen there, but essentially abuse is infliction of, upon an adult of an injury that results in physical or mental anguish, physical harm or mental anguish. Neglect, on the other hand, can be broken down further into, as I mentioned, pretty much self-neglect, failure to provide for one's own needs, neglect by others, a caregiver failing to provide for the needs of someone they're caring for, or simply abandonment of that individual. The third area of exploitation is a lengthier definition, but in short, when you're talking about exploitation, you're talking about an individual using the resources of another without their consent or beyond the consent that was provided, or through deception, threat, or intimidation. If one suspects any of these areas of abuse, whether it be abuse, exploitation, or neglect, the Ohio Revised Code provides that certain individuals are mandatory reporters of such abuse. 5101.63A provides that an individual listed under A2 And if you look again at your sheets, that's where I've tried to provide the laundry list of mandatory reporters. We'll talk about that in a second. Says if there's a suspicion, a reasonable cause to believe that there's a person being affected by abuse, neglect, or exploitation, they shall immediately report that belief to the County Department of Job and Family Services. So it's not voluntary for these mandatory reporters. So who are the mandatory reporters? If you, as I said, look at your handout. I've done my best to boldface or highlight the summary of the reporters of elder abuse. Some of them aren't so surprising. You're going to look at, you see attorneys, physicians, hospitals, nursing homes. But there's a few on the list that might, draw your attention. There's the Department of the Humane Society. If you're an employee of the Humane Society, you're a mandatory reporter. Building inspectors are mandatory reporters. So if you're on that list, you're a mandatory reporter. But it's important to know, even if you're not on that list, it's very important to say this, if you're not on that list, you still can and should report instances of suspected abuse. Okay? So if you're going to report these instances of abuse, you kind of need to know what the warning signs are. We'll start first with abuse, and these aren't exhaustive, obviously. There's a number of other things you can look for, but just to highlight some of the few factors that you might look for in elder abuse cases. Some of them are obvious. Bruises, welts, physical signs of physical abuse are obvious indicators, but some of them are not so obvious. It might be a situation where a caregiver is preventing third parties from visiting with the person they're caring for. We know he doesn't want to see you now. So they're trying to protect their own misdeeds by keeping them isolated. Oftentimes it's the elder themselves who's making the report. May do it in a subtle way, just he's pretty rough with me, or he's not very nice to me. He keeps me, doesn't let me do anything. So you have to listen to our elders to find out if maybe that warrants further investigation. On the neglect side, the most obvious signs are physical changes in appearance as well. So you have malnutrition, dehydration, poor hygiene. Those could be indicators of neglect, whether it be of oneself or perhaps a caregiver is not doing what they need to be doing to take care of their elderly. Sometimes it's desertion or leaving the person at home alone when they shouldn't be alone, leaving them in an office when they shouldn't be alone. So these are some indicators for neglect. When we turn to exploitation and try to find signs of exploitation, we're usually looking at bank records and bank activity. Elder individuals either making substantial withdrawals that they're not accustomed to making. It's not typical for them to take out $10,000 every 2 weeks, and all of a sudden they're doing so. That would be a sign to look into it a little bit further. Adding individuals on bank accounts, joint accounts frequently are used. So you have to be suspicious a little bit if that happens. Using co-signing for loans. I want to be careful, though, in each one of these, substantial withdrawals, adding joint owners on bank accounts, adding beneficiaries, or even co-signing for loans. By and large, there may be perfectly legitimate explanations for doing each one of those things. So standing in and of themselves does not indicate, well, there's definitely an exploitation going on here. As a lawyer, I can't tell you how many times I have clients come into my office with wanting a basic estate plan. They want a power of attorney. They want, their will and so forth. And they've indicated to me they took care of their bills because they put their son Johnny down as a joint owner on the bank account. So Johnny's going to take care of all the bills. And they may have let's say they have 3 children. Johnny's going to take care of the bills because he's local. Frequently, individuals don't understand what the impact of that is. So one impact is an estate impact. If that account has the majority of the elder individual's money in it when they pass away, who's going to get the money? Johnny, right? So we need to understand that, and clients need to understand, individuals need to understand that when they do that, they're impacting their entire estate plan. They may, Johnny may not take advantage of that opportunity, right? Johnny may, as he frequently does in my experience, say, well, that's not what Mom wanted. I'm just going to use this to pay the bills, and I'm going to divide the money up. On the other hand, Johnny's legally entitled to do that, to take the money. So, and frequently, it's not so innocent. And it is a means to kind of, without the oversight of the court, have a transfer of substantial funds to to a specific named beneficiary by just adding them on an account. So you need to be mindful of that, and at least it could give rise to further inquiry. Why'd you do that? Why didn't you just add Johnny down as a POA, for instance, is what I would typically recommend there. Similarly, we've got, as a lawyer, I'm looking for instances when people come into my office and they say, my mom wants a new will, or they give me a call, my mom wants a new will, and she wants to list me as a beneficiary. She doesn't like the other children, or they've been bad to her, so can you help me, right? I believe it or not, I get those calls. And, well, let me talk to mom, right, is my first question. Because mom might have a good reason. Mom might have a situation where, yeah, my first son's in jail, for stealing, and I've already given my daughter, the lion's share of my funds, and I just want to leave this other child something. So, again, these aren't determinative signs, but they're factors that warrant a further inquiry. You always have to be suspicious about that. Who's making the requests? Same as the bank account. If the son or the daughter or the neighbor is making the initial communications, that's a sign you need to look further. Why isn't the individual themselves calling up and saying, this is what I want? So what happens if you do have a suspicion of abuse, exploitation, or neglect? Well, as I mentioned, as a mandatory reporter, you have a duty to report it, and if you feel the need to report, even if you're not a mandatory reporter, you have the ability to report. If the instance occurs in the community, then the contact information is on your screen here. It's also on your handout. You would contact typically the local Adult Protective Services Department with Department of Job and Family Services. It's a simple phone call. We have a representative here, Craig Hunter with Adult Protective Services, or Lucas County, who is suggested to me that phone number it's available and manned 24 hours a day. So you can make the phone call, somebody will get back to you, even if it's a Sunday afternoon. Craig's available also after the presentation should any of you have questions about how APS handles those calls once made. Okay, because I'm not going to get too much into that today, but feel free to talk to Craig. Could you stand up so that they could recognize you? Thank you. So feel free to talk to Craig after the meeting. Thank you for your services as well, Craig. Thank you very much. If, on the other hand, the report is of an incident in a nursing facility, assisted living facility, it goes to a different department. The Advocates for Basic Legal Equality Long-Term Care Ombudsman Group handles nursing home complaints. So same premise, you make the report, but you have a different contact. Okay. Sometimes I get the question, well, what if I'm wrong? What if the person that came into the bank and asked to put their name on mom's account had a perfectly logical explanation, and I've reported this, and now they're upset with me because I've suspected some wrongdoing? Well, the code provides protection for those instances. 5101.63D specifically says that so long as it's not done with a malicious purpose, if it's a reasonable belief that there is an instance of elder abuse, that person is immune from both civil and criminal responsibility. So Craig has suggested to me, when in doubt, report. Okay, there's a bigger downside to not reporting when you suspect, obviously, than reporting and find out there was a legitimate reason for that $10,000 withdrawal. Maybe mom needed a new roof, But that's what APS is going to do. They're going to make the calls, find out, and they'll close the case. No harm, no foul. But if you don't make the report, that's where harm can occur. Take a little bit of a turn and discuss a few moments powers of attorney. First, so that we're all on the same page, I want to describe the differences between the two most widely used powers of attorney, which would be a financial power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. They are separate instruments. A financial power of attorney, as its name implies, deals with financial or business-related matters. Okay. Some highlights in terms of important factors about financial powers of attorney. There's dozens of them out there, dozens of different forms. You can go on the internet and find, dozens of powers of attorney that you can use that would mostly be effective for the purpose that they state. Us lawyers have a variety of forms in our office. And then you have the state of Ohio that has a statutory form. I've kind of favored using the statutory form, quite frankly, recently. It's a very effective tool for creating a power of attorney. Of the power of attorney forms that are out there, they're kind of further broken into two different groups. You have what we call a springing power of attorney and an immediate power of attorney. The springing power of attorney, as its name implies, springs into effect or comes into effect upon the occurrence of an event. That event is usually a letter or a note from the doctor that says the principal is no longer able to make decisions because of their own diminished capacity. So the authority in the document then would spring into effect upon that occurrence. Okay? More commonly, we see what we call immediate powers of attorney that don't have that condition of authority in them. So I'm giving my wife a power of attorney to handle our business affairs. I'm probably not going to have it be a springing power of attorney because I don't want her to have to go to my doctor and prove that Dean can't make decisions in order for her to go to the bank and open up a new account or to deal with our financial advisor. So more commonly, these are immediately effective. So if they're effective immediately, they're more ripe for potential misuse because you don't have to establish that diminished capacity. Important distinction between the financial and the healthcare power of attorney, they are in fact different documents. Frequently I see situations where people who are a financial POA want to say, well, I have the right to decide where mom's medical treatment should be or whether or not she should receive this surgery or not. They misunderstand there's a distinction between the two documents. Very commonly, someone is the financial power of attorney and the healthcare power of attorney, and therefore they do have that dual role. But simply being a financial power of attorney does not give authority to make medical decisions. The last two bullets there I think are probably the most important. The law in Ohio says for a financial power of attorney, for the agent under a financial power of attorney, they cannot do certain things unless it specifically says so in the document. I'll give you a few examples. An agent under a power of attorney cannot give money away of the principal unless the document says so. It's called a provision of authority to make a gift. An agent under a financial power of attorney cannot change a beneficiary on a bank account unless the power of attorney document says so. There could be circumstances where you may want an agent to do those things. So I may want my wife, for instance, to be able to give our funds away even if I don't have the ability to, because I would expect she would do so consistent with my previous practices and wishes. So I might, in certain circumstances, provide, yes, I want this to happen. So if you're dealing with somebody who is acting under a power of attorney, you need to look at the document closely to see what exactly is spelled out in terms of the scope of their authority. One of the more litigated matters is the misuse of power of attorneys for the purpose of drawing checks to third parties or using those funds under the authority of the document when in fact there's not a specific provision entitling it. So the law became very clear in that so that to prevent that misunderstanding of, well, what exactly did they want me to be able to do with this document? Real quick to back up there 1 second. I'm going to cover this more in the healthcare setting as well because it's kind of the same application. You can't override the wishes of a principal. Very frequently misunderstood by agents. So just because you're somebody's power of attorney, it allows you to make decisions on behalf of that person, not in spite of the person. Okay? We'll talk about that more in just a moment. Healthcare POA. The distinction here is, remember I mentioned springing powers of attorney? A healthcare power of attorney is always a springing power of attorney. So if you're someone's healthcare agent, you do not have authority to make any healthcare decisions for them unless and until the person has lost the capacity to make informed healthcare decisions for themselves. At that point, your authority is established. So, and that's also misunderstood frequently. Just because you have the document does not necessarily give you that authority. You need to have the accompanying supportive letter or physician record showing that the principal has then lost their capacity to make their own decisions. Sometimes it's obvious, they're unconscious and somebody needs to make a decision whether a surgery should be made. Well, now you obviously, your authority is effective. Sometimes it's not so obvious. couple important points about the healthcare power of attorney. I already mentioned it doesn't take effect until they've lost capacity. Just like a financial power of attorney is not a healthcare power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney is not a financial power of attorney. I have clients come to my office frequently, and I ask them, are your mom's power of attorney? Yeah, I'm mom's power of attorney. I can talk to you. They come into my office, and what do they have with them? A healthcare power of attorney. Does them no good for me. Okay, we can't establish an attorney-client relationship under the healthcare power of attorney. They can help make medical decisions for the person if they've lost the capacity, but they can't talk about finances and they can't rearrange, assets and so forth without the financial POA. So they're different. Talk about the last thing, and then I'll jump to the second to the last. They can't override the wishes of the principal. I mentioned that in the financial power of attorney. It's equally true in a healthcare setting. I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean by each of those. In the financial setting, you may run in, and I've run into a number of situations where the principal is making decisions that the agent does not like. Okay, and there may be a good reason they don't like it. Maybe the principal is giving away, falling for all those sweepstakes scams, all right, giving money to strangers. Well, surprisingly to some, the agent can't prevent that. Okay? They can try to prevent that through certain means, but they can't technically step in and tell the bank, don't allow mom to write checks anymore if mom's the one that's the principal. They don't have authority to stop the independent choice of the principal. I'll get back to how what do they do about that in a moment, but the point is you can't prevent people from their own independent free will through a power of attorney. They don't have more authority than the principal. Similarly, in the healthcare setting, same thing. Principal trumps the agent. Whatever principal wants, principal should have a right to express, and the agent can't override that. Give you an example of a very specific case that I handled recently, where I got a call from a person whose friend was in a nursing home. She had had a stroke. She had very difficult time communicating. It was difficult to understand what she was saying. But he said that she didn't want to be in the nursing home. I said, okay, well, why is she in the nursing home? Well, the doctor said she didn't need to be in the nursing home. I said, well, then why is she in the nursing home? And he explained because her brother is her power of attorney, and the brother power of attorney told the nursing home, whatever you do, don't let mom out. It's best for her, let my sister out. It's best for my sister to be here. She needs this care, and you are not allowed to let her leave no matter what she says. Well, after meeting with this particular client, I learned, with some difficulty, but learned that she completely understood why she was there. She did not want to be there. Her physician didn't feel she had to be there, but they were essentially listening to the agent over the wishes of the principal. So the brother's wishes were being honored, and the resident's wishes were not. After explaining to the facility the impropriety of that, they fairly quickly released this particular person, and she came home with good care. But that's not so surprising that people think that. I mean, it happens all the time. Agents think, I'm the agent, so I'm making mom's decisions, right? I'm making the decisions. I had a call this weekend. My grandfather is not doing well, and he's refusing treatment. Can you come out and get him to sign a power of attorney so we can make him go into a facility? Well, there's a couple problems with that. One, grandfather, she started the conversation by saying he doesn't know what he's doing, right? He doesn't understand what's going on. Well, it's too late now. He can't sign a power of attorney if he doesn't understand what's going on, right? He needs to have an understanding of the nature of the business of which he's signing. That's the first problem. Even if he did understand it and could sign a power of attorney, or even if a power of attorney was in place, you still can't force him to do something he does not want to do under a power of attorney. Which brings me to guardianships. Guardianships is a legal relationship. So is a power of attorney, but the power of attorney is one that's voluntarily created. A guardianship is a legal relationship created by the court. And the way that relationship is typically created is a party would need to obtain an expert evaluation over the proposed, what we call ward. I don't like that term, but that's the term that they use. You'd need to get an expert evaluation to show that this person, according to the physician, does not understand the nature of their daily affairs and can't conduct their own business, and therefore the physician recommends, does not declare, but recommends a guardianship. Physicians don't have the power to declare a guardianship. They have the authority and the ability to recommend a guardianship. With that expert evaluation, there's a number of other filings that get filed with the probate court. The probate court would notify the proposed ward that the filings have been made. And the reason for that is somewhat obvious. You want the ward to know what's going on. If a son or a daughter filed a guardianship application over me, I'd want to know. And if I felt, what are they doing? I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs. I would want, and I'm entitled to be heard on that. So I could go to court, there'd be a hearing, and I could present evidence as to why I should or should not have a guardianship implemented over me, all right? Sometimes it's real easy. Sometimes the proposed ward, most times, the proposed ward just doesn't show up because legitimately they may be in need of a guardian. But there's at least rights. Everyone has the right to be heard and the right to determine whether or not it would be appropriate to have a guardianship, because the courts sort of disfavor guardianships over other alternatives. I'll explain that in a second. Types of guardianship. There's a variety of types. The most common is what we call guardianship over the person and estate. So we're talking about a person who would assume the responsibilities of what sort of like the healthcare decisions. So think about the healthcare POA, they'd take on that role, and a guardian of the estate would take on the role of the financial matters. Usually it's the same person. It can be different people, but usually it's the same. As I mentioned, the courts sort of prefer, though, to look to alternative means. Because of the restrictive nature of guardianship, courts like to see, is there another way we can help this person? Is there a power of attorney out there so that, if the bills aren't getting paid and that's why we need the guardianship, well, maybe there's a POA in place and we just didn't know about it. If we can find a POA that's assumed that responsibility to pay mom or dad's bills, we can avoid a guardianship. So they're going to look to those options, healthcare POAs, financial POAs, the joint accounts that I mentioned, and other less restrictive proceedings. However, sometimes it's these less restrictive alternatives that are the problem. As I mentioned earlier about the POA situation, remember I kept stressing you can't override the wishes of the principal. Well, what if the principal's making those decisions and it's not serving them well? It's not in their best interest. They are giving money away to the sweepstakes, or they're refusing medical treatment that they desperately need. I mentioned that the agent can't force those things. So what do? The agent would then apply for a guardianship over their principal. And in the powers of attorney themselves, we typically have something called a nomination provision. I could sign a power of attorney that says, my son's going to be my POA. He can make all of these decisions for me. But if I ever need a guardian, I would also want him to be my guardian. Why do we do that? Because if I'm making bad decisions, remember I said he couldn't stop me from making those decisions as my POA, but he could as my guardian. And I could select, while I'm competent, who I want to be my guardian if the need should arise. So my son would then apply to be my guardian, and in applying to be my guardian, he would have a preference because he was nominated in one of my POA documents. And upon becoming my guardian, he could then stop me, essentially, from harming myself, whether it be financially harming myself by poor practices in terms of my finances, or physically harming myself through neglect or not receiving appropriate medical care. So sometimes, and then lastly, even when there's a power of attorney, we may need a guardian to protect the principal from the agent. So if we have a scenario where an agent is misusing their power, they're writing checks from the principal to themselves, they're neglecting that individual. Well, remember, they don't have more authority than the principal, but no one else has authority either if they're not the POA. So that person, perhaps to protect the elderly individual from the agent themselves, may have to apply to become the guardian. And the benefit of the guardianship, people tend to avoid them if they can, but there's great benefit to the guardianship. Guardianships are oversought by our court. Court does a very good job of making sure there's appropriate accounting of funds, appropriate visitations for the individual. So sometimes, while guardianship may be a course of last resort, sometimes it's the best situation for an elderly person. So these are some of the ways we can, consider, protecting our elderly community, keeping a watchful eye, making the appropriate reports. understanding the uses and misuses of powers of attorney, and then ultimately understanding the benefit of our Lucas County probate court system of guardianships to help protect our elderly seniors. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this topic. As I said, it's very dear to me, and I think we open it up. We have a few minutes for questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Dean, thank you. I'm Julia Peklavanos with the Alzheimer's Association.
Sure. Hi, Julia.
How are you?
Good.
I'd like to ask you to elaborate a little bit on the issue of dementia.
Sure.
And the fact that 1 in 3 elderly Americans dies with a form of dementia. And perhaps how families should be addressing that earlier rather than later. Unfortunately, we see a lot of cases where it's either denied or unintentionally neglected for a very long period of time.
Thank you so much for that question. Absolutely. The sooner the better. And dementia is obviously a situation where, it can get too late pretty quickly, right? We don't know how quickly the illness will progress and the impact will have on the individual so that they may lose that capacity to make the document in the first place. Because in order to sign a power of attorney, to give this authority to your loved ones, you do need to have an understanding of your day-to-day business affairs. So if a person has the effort, as I mentioned, the client I had this weekend, if it's too late, it's too late. And then that forces you into a guardianship situation, which is very costly and very time-consuming when you may not need one. As I said, guardianships are great when you're trying to protect against abuse and exploitation and so forth, but sometimes that's not the issue at all. Sometimes it's just mom or dad is slipping, and we just need somebody to be able to pay the bills. And if you've waited too long, you've got a huge problem. What I tell people is even before that diagnosis, right? I'm a firm believer. People ask, well, do I need a will? Do I need a power of attorney? Do I need a trust? I feel pretty confident that everyone needs 4 documents: a will, a healthcare power of attorney, a financial power of attorney, and a living will. Okay? And I'm saying everyone that's 18 years and older. I had a situation, my eldest son had heart surgery when I was 19 years old. Even though I'm a lawyer, I wasn't thinking when he turned 18, you better sign a will, a power of attorney, a living will, you know what I'm saying? But it was a hard conversation to go in and say, hey, something happens, buddy, I need you to sign this, right? I need you to tell me, what do you want to have happen if you're on life support? So obviously that may be a little more extreme, but I have a number of clients who didn't do that and are younger and now are in guardianships that don't need to be. But absolutely, when someone has a diagnosis, if you hadn't had one by that point, you should really look into it. Thank you for the question.
Brief comment and an even briefer question, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who's experienced this, but I have gone through the entire guardianship or the entire power of attorney process all the way through being a designated guardian and then a guardian. The system really does work. Take advantage of the time to have these conversations while you can, because when the time comes, it comes kind of quickly. And that brings me to my question. What are you doing, groups that are within your sphere of influence, the stakeholders in your line of work, what are you doing to prepare for the onslaught of baby boomers that are going to be needing these services all at once?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do belong to a couple of organizations where we're doing everything we can to get out the word, so to speak. To Julia's point, one group is Advanced Care Planning Coalition, wherein the primary purpose is to let baby boomers and younger individuals know it's important to have these documents in place. It can get too late real quick. And you started your question with something that was also extremely important, which was have the conversation. In this group that I belong to, we call it Conversations Because You Care, right? It's one thing to have the documents. It's critical to have the documents in place. But it's equally important to have the conversation. I'll give you one quick example of how important it was for me. I was power of attorney for an elderly client who didn't have family, at least direct family. She had distant nieces and nephews. And she made me her power of attorney. And I'd known her for quite some time. She grew ill and ended up at hospice. And she said to me, before she went in, she said, Dean, whatever you do, I don't want to see any of my family while I'm in hospice. I thought, wow, that's really? I'm sure they're going to care and they're going to want to visit with you. She said, I don't want them to see me like this. I want to remember me the way I was. And that meant a lot to me because it meant a lot to her. Had she not had that statement, made that statement, we had not had that conversation, what do you think I would have done? I'd have been parading nieces and nephews in there thinking I was doing exactly what she wanted. So to your point, having a conversation is also very important.
I forgot to mention
Sure.
also, the system works, and it works really well from my perspective, but you have to be prepared to go through it and go through with
The
it.
guardianship?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The system really does work.
We have a great court, and they make sure, and even when there's a guardianship in place, we do limit some of the rights of that ward because we're doing it to protect them. But there's a recent guardianship bill of rights that was enacted in Ohio, which even strives further to protect wards so that they're not stripped of all of their rights. They still have a say in where they live and how their life is handled. So, again, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the group. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean, for the great presentation. To show our appreciation, the Toledo Rotary Club Foundation will be making a donation in your honor to the Rotary International Polio Plus Fund. And we also have this book on Toledo history for you.
Cool. Thank you.
So thanks again.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Please join us next week when our speaker will be Bernard Swickey, Automotive Communities Partnership, Center for Automotive Research. Immediately following today's program, the Black Tie Affair Steering Committee will be meeting in the Presque Isle Room upstairs, and the Constitution Committee will be meeting in the North Cape Room. David, again, welcome to our club. Great to have you as a member. And I would now like to invite back to the podium past President Chuck Mann.
I first have an observation that I wanted to share with you. And ladies, you'll have to take my word on this. In this hotel, in this building, down on the first floor, there is a men's room to the left of the desk. In the men's room is a urinal. There is hot water hooked to that urinal. So when you first time it happened to me, I thought maybe I was getting the flu. It was quite surprising, refreshing at the same time. And I'm sure there'll be a long line after this meeting to find out whether I'm real. This is absolutely true. I don't know whether it's the hotel's attempt to put in a poor man's spa or what the reason for it is, but if it happens to you, you're not getting sick. It's hooked to hot water. Now that I got that off my... Fred Allen was an American comedian and one of the most popular and forward-looking humorists in the golden age of radio. He passed away on March 17, 1956. Here are some quotes from Fred Allen. The first time I sang in the church choir, 200 people changed their religion. Television is a medium because anything well done is rare. Most of us spend the first 6 days of the week sowing wild oats. Then we go to church on Sunday and pray for a crop failure. A cocktail party is held to enable 40 people to talk about themselves at the same time. The man who remains after the liquor is gone is the host. I always have trouble remembering three things: faces, names, and I can't remember what the third thing is. And finally, I like long walks, especially when they are taken by people who annoy me.
Thank you, Chuck. Remember to be a servant out there so we can be the inspiration. We are adjourned.